Picture this: the executioner raises his axe. The crowd in the muddy square of Bucharest holds its breath, but the blade never falls. The man holding the axe looks down at the prisoner kneeling before him and freezes. His hands begin to shake, his breath shortens, his grip loosens. Something about the man in the mud terrifies him. Not a saint, not a demon, a politician. The executioner drops the axe, turns, and runs into the crowd screaming that he cannot kill this man. That moment does not belong to God or fate, it belongs to fear. And the man spared that day is Michael the Brave. That aborted execution in 1593 is not the beginning of a heroic legend. It is the opening move of a survival story set inside one of the deadliest political systems ever created. To understand why that executioner ran, you must first understand the death trap that was Wallachia. Forget romantic maps of Europe. Forget borders drawn in gold ink. Wallachia was not a country, it was a kill zone. A narrow strip of land crushed between the Ottoman Empire to the south and the cold indifference of Christian Europe to the north. No natural borders, no powerful allies, no mercy. But the Ottomans didn't rule Wallachia the way they ruled provinces. They turned it into a business model. The Sultan didn't care who governed this land, he only cared who paid. The throne of Wallachia was not inherited, it was auctioned. Every few years, sometimes every few months, the Ottoman court in Istanbul opened the bidding. Ambitious nobles flooded the city, bribing viziers, commanders, and court officials. Whoever paid the most became prince. The losers usually lost their heads. To afford the bribes, these men borrowed enormous sums from Levantan bankers, Greek financiers, Jewish syndicates, and European diplomats. The interest was ruinous. The clock started ticking the moment they won. A new prince arrived in Bucharest already bankrupt. His job was simple: strip the country bare before the Sultan replaced him. Tax everything, sell offices, confiscate land, break the peasants, pay the creditors, pay the Sultan, survive briefly, then die. It was a conveyor belt of tyrants fueled by debt, and Michael knew this system better than anyone because he was born inside it. Before he was a warlord, Michael was a tycoon. He was Ban of Craiova, governor of the richest region in Wallachia. He traded cattle, salt, grain, and influence. He lent money. He controlled routes. He built networks. By the early 1590s, he was the richest man in the country. That wealth made him dangerous. The reigning prince, Alexander the Bad, understood the threat immediately. A rich noble with ambition and popular support was a death sentence waiting to happen, so Alexander tried to remove him. The failed execution you imagined earlier was not mercy, it was incompetence. And Michael understood the message perfectly. If he stayed in Wallachia, he would die. So instead of running away, he went straight to the lion's den. Michael traveled to Istanbul, not as a refugee, not as a supplicant, as a gambler. For weeks, he navigated the corridors of the imperial court. He bribed the Grand Vizier. He bribed palace officials. He bribed janissary commanders. He promised Sultan Murad II a tribute so high it was almost absurd. To finance this, he borrowed from everyone: Jewish bankers, Turkish power brokers, Venetian agents, anyone with coin and patience. He mortgaged his future and Wallachia's. In September 1593, the Sultan named him voivode. The creditors celebrated. They believed they had secured the perfect puppet, a man so deep in debt he would never dare disobey. They followed him back to Bucharest like vultures circling a carcass. Michael returned surrounded by Ottoman guards and moneylenders. The procession looked less like a coronation and more like a hostile corporate takeover. And at first he played his role perfectly. Taxes exploded, chimneys were taxed, livestock was taxed, movement was taxed, survival was taxed. Tax collectors fanned out across the countryside with brutal efficiency. Peasants were beaten, villages emptied, grain stores vanished. To the outside world, Michael was just another Ottoman lackey bleeding his own people dry. The Sultan was pleased. The creditors were collecting. The Habsburgs dismissed him as lost. Everyone was watching the wrong hand, because while Michael extracted gold by day, he gathered information by night. He counted men. He mapped villages. He assessed loyalty. He met secretly with boyars, promising them escape from the debt cycle. He contacted Transylvania's Prince Sigismund Bathory, laying the groundwork for rebellion. And he watched the Ottoman soldiers and creditors in Bucharest grow arrogant. They harassed women, looted shops, mocked the locals. They believed the prince belonged to them. Michael let them believe it. By the winter of 1594, the pressure became unbearable. The creditors demanded final payments. The Sultan demanded more tribute. The system was about to collapse, so Michael made his move. The creditors were invited to the princely palace for a final settlement. They arrived relaxed, drinking wine, joking about how easy it was to own a country. They expected gold. Michael entered the hall wearing armor. He asked one question, "Are they all here?" The doors slammed shut. What followed was not a battle, it was a liquidation. Michael's guards slaughtered every creditor in the room. Turkish merchants, financiers, garrison commanders, none escaped. Then the palace cannons turned on the Ottoman quarters of the city. By morning, Bucharest was burning. 2,000 Ottoman soldiers were dead. The debt was cancelled with steel. Michael had not just rebelled, he had declared war on the Ottoman financial system itself, and he knew the response would be apocalyptic, so he didn't wait, he attacked. Michael raced south toward the Danube. The river was the Ottoman Empire's northern lifeline, fortified by a chain of stone strongholds controlling trade and movement. Winter froze the river solid. Michael used it as a highway. His cavalry crossed the ice and struck Ottoman territory itself, something no Wallachian prince had ever dared. He burned supply depots, captured cannons, destroyed fortresses. At Giurgiu, he disguised his men in Turkish uniforms, tricked the gates open, and annihilated the garrison. Weeks, the Danube defense system collapsed. The psychological shock was enormous. For generations, the Balkans believed the Ottomans were invincible. Now they saw forts falling into frozen rivers. They saw heads on pikes. The monster was bleeding. Istanbul erupted in fury. Sultan Murad II died in early 1595, leaving his successor maimed II, an empire suddenly exposed. The Grand Vizier Sinan Pasha was given unlimited authority. His orders were simple: erase Wallachia. Not punish, not negotiate, erase. An army of perhaps 100,000 men assembled: janissaries, cavalry, artillery. Michael had 16,000, the math was obscene. As spring thawed the plains into mud, Michael retreated. He abandoned open ground, he abandoned the Danube, he pulled into forests and swamps. He was hunting terrain, not glory. He found it near a muddy river crossing called Kalugarani. August 23, 1595, a narrow wooden bridge. Marshes on both sides, dense forests choking movement. Michael placed his cannons in the trees, he hid reserves in the undergrowth, and he waited. Sinan Pasha attacked with confidence. His troops flooded the bridge, too many, too tight, unable to deploy. Michael opened fire, cannons tore into packed ranks, men fell into sucking mud, horses drowned under armor, wave after wave died on the crossing, but numbers tell eventually. Michael's lines bent, mercenaries wavered, panic spread. This is where politicians flee. Michael charged. He grabbed a battle axe and threw himself into the Ottoman infantry, killing officers with his own hands. The sight electrified his army. They rallied. A hidden flanking force hit the Ottoman camp. Discipline collapsed. The bridge broke under retreating soldiers. Thousands drowned. Sinan Pasha himself was dragged from the swamp, humiliated and bleeding. 16,000 men had shattered an army 6 times their size. Michael had won the Battle of Kalugarani. But victories can lie. As the field quieted, Michael counted bodies. He could not replace his losses. The Ottomans still had reserves. If he stayed, he would be encircled. So that night he did something that looks like defeat and was actually survival. He abandoned Bucharest. He retreated north into the mountains. The Ottomans occupied the capital, converting churches, declaring Wallachia finished. They believed the war was over. They were wrong. Michael wasn't fleeing. He was preparing something far more dangerous. Michael the Brave retreated into the mountains as Bucharest burned behind him. To the Ottomans it looked like victory. To Sinan Pasha it was confirmation that the Wallachian revolt had broken. But what they didn't understand, what they had never understood, was that Michael did not think in straight lines. He thought in reversals. Up in the Carpathian passes, where the air thinned and roads vanished into forest and stone, Michael waited. His army was battered, exhausted, and reduced, but it was alive, and that was everything. He had retreated not to hide, but to connect, because war against an empire is never won alone. Waiting for him in the mountains was the one thing the Ottomans feared most: a coalition. The Prince of Transylvania, Sigismund Bathory, finally arrived with his army, 40,000 men, heavy Hungarian cavalry, German mercenaries, Italian musketeers. For the first time since the rebellion began, Michael was not the underdog. The roles had reversed. Below them in the plains, Sinan Pasha believed the campaign was finished. His army occupied Bucharest, his men looted freely, churches were converted, administrative orders were being drafted to dissolve Wallachia entirely. The Ottomans had done this dozens of times before. They believed they were watching the end of a country. Instead, they were standing beneath an avalanche. The Allied army descended from the mountains with terrifying speed. Sinan Pasha didn't even attempt to hold Bucharest. He knew the math now, and it was against him. The Ottoman army retreated south toward the Danube, burning everything behind them. Villages vanished, crops were destroyed. Thousands of civilians were chained and dragged along, destined for the slave markets of Istanbul. This was not a retreat, it was a theft. Michael chased them, relentlessly. He liberated Targovice, the old capital, then pushed south without pause. He knew he had one chance to finish this war properly, before the Ottomans crossed the river and vanished back into safety. That chance came at Giurgiu. Giurgiu was the gateway, a massive fortress city on the northern bank of the Danube. To escape, Sinan Pasha's army had to cross a single great bridge to the southern shore. When Michael arrived, the crossing was already underway. The bridge was jammed. Cannons. Wagons of stolen wealth, soldiers, thousands of chained civilians. Michael did not negotiate. He placed his artillery on the hills overlooking the river and opened fire. Cannonballs tore into the bridge, panic erupted, horses reared, men screamed, wagons overturned, the bridge snapped. With a thunderous crack, it collapsed into the Danube. Thousands of Ottoman soldiers, weighed down by armor and gold, were pulled under. The river turned red. Those still trapped on the northern bank were crushed between Michael's army and the water. It was annihilation. Sinan Pasha barely escaped, watching helplessly as his army was destroyed and the captives were freed. The campaign was over. The Ottoman Empire had been humiliated not by a great power but by a state it had treated as disposable. Michael the Brave had done the impossible. For a brief moment, he was the most celebrated man in Christendom. Bells rang in Vienna. The Pope praised him as a defender of the faith, but victory carries a price, and Michael paid it immediately. In exchange for Transylvania's help, Michael had signed a treaty. On paper, he was now a vassal of Transylvania, a hero but subordinate, a savior but owned. And to the north, another empire was watching closely, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. They did not see Michael as a defender of Christendom. They saw him as a destabilizing force, a man who didn't understand limits. Michael understood something they did not. As long as he remained only Prince of Wallachia, he would always be someone else's pawn, so he stopped defending borders and started erasing them. In 1599, the political situation in Transylvania collapsed. Sigismund Bathory abdicated. In his place rose Cardinal Andrew Bathory, a Polish-backed ruler hostile to both Michael and the Habsburgs. For Michael, this was a noose tightening. If Transylvania fell under Polish control, Wallachia would be surrounded, so Michael chose offense over survival. He sent secret messages to Emperor Rudolf II asking for funds, then marched without waiting for an answer. In October 1599, Michael led his army west through the high passes of the Carpathians. It was a brutal crossing. Cannons dragged through mud, men sleeping in freezing rain, supply lines stretched to breaking, but speed was everything. Michael emerged in Transylvania before Cardinal Andrew fully understood what was happening. Panic spread through the Transylvanian court. Andrew scrambled to raise an army, relying heavily on feudal nobles and their levies. Michael knew exactly how to break that force. Transylvania was not united. Its nobility ruled brutally over the Shakleys, a warrior people stripped of their ancient rights and reduced to serfdom. Michael sent messengers, "Fight for me and you will be free." Thousands defected. What followed was not just an invasion, it was a social revolt. On October 28, 1599, the two armies met at the Battle of Selimbar near Sibiu. Cardinal Andrew's army was larger and better equipped. Michael's was tired and desperate, but Michael had momentum and belief. He opened with artillery, then unleashed his cavalry. The Transylvanian nobles broke. When the Shakleys on Andrew's side saw their kin fighting for Michael, morale collapsed. The battle turned into a rout. Andrew fled. 3 days later, Shakely peasants found him hiding in a shepherd's hut and killed him. His head was brought to Michael. On November 1st, 1599, Michael the Brave rode into Alba Iulia, not as a guest, as a conqueror. Inside the cathedral, Michael united crowns that had never been worn together. For the first time in history, a Wallachian prince ruled Transylvania. This was the zenith. From the Danube to the mountains, Michael commanded a territory that had never answered to one ruler before. But he was not finished. He looked east to Moldavia. Moldavia was ruled by Jeremiah Muvila, a Polish-backed prince. Michael knew Poland was preparing to strike, so he struck first. In the spring of 1600, Michael crossed the Milkov River with terrifying speed. Polish and Moldavian troops scattered before him. Fortresses surrendered without a fight. Asi opened its gates. In weeks, Moldavia was his. On July 6, 1600, Michael issued a document unlike any before it. He titled himself Prince of Wallachia, Prince of Transylvania, Prince of Moldavia. For the first time in history, all three Romanian-speaking principalities were united under one ruler. The impossible union had been achieved. From the Tisza River to the Dniester, Michael ruled. He had defied the Ottomans, outmaneuvered the Habsburgs, humiliated Poland. He stood at the absolute peak of his power. But empires do not forgive men who redraw maps without permission, and Michael had just redrawn Europe. The impossible union lasted less than 4 months, not because it was weak, but because it was unacceptable. Michael the Brave had done something every empire feared. He proved the map was negotiable, and men who prove that do not live long. At the height of his power in the summer of 1600, Michael ruled 3 lands, Wallachia, Transylvania, and Moldavia, but he ruled them with a single tool, his army. There was no unified administration, no shared law, no shared nobility, only momentum, and momentum is expensive. Michael's army was made largely of mercenaries, veterans hardened by years of war, loyal as long as they were paid, but the gold was gone, the Ottomans were close to him. The Polish treasury was hostile. And the man who mattered most, Emperor Rudolf II, had stopped sending money. Michael did what every ruler does when desperate. He turned inward, taxes rose again, peasant obligations deepened, promises were broken. In Transylvania, the Shakleys, the same people who had fought for him, were pushed back into serfdom to appease the Hungarian nobility. Michael had built an empire, but he had not built consent, and the sharks smelled blood. The first strike came from within Transylvania. The Hungarian nobility despised Michael. To them, he was a Wallachian outsider, orthodox, foreign, dangerous. They reached out to the one man who could remove him without consequences, Giorgio Basta. Basta was supposed to be Michael's ally. Both served the Holy Roman Emperor, but Basta saw Michael clearly, too popular, too independent, too ambitious. When the Transylvanian nobles proposed rebellion, Basta did not arrest them. He joined them. On September 18, 1600, the two forces met at the Battle of Muraslau. Michael brought veterans, wall-ending warriors, Cossacks, mercenaries who had followed him across rivers and mountains. Basta brought discipline, imperial infantry entrenched on high ground, musketeers arranged into kill zones, cavalry held in reserve. Michael tried to force movement. Basta refused. Michael attacked uphill. It was the first time his instincts failed him. Imperial gunfire shredded his lines. When his men wavered, Basta released his cavalry. It was not a retreat, it was a slaughter. 4,000 of Michael's best men died in the mud. Michael barely escaped, and the illusion shattered. The moment weakness appeared, the second blow fell from the north. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth moved with brutal speed. Grand Chancellor Jan Zamoyski led a massive army of Polish forces, including the feared winged Hussars. They swept through Moldavia in days. Jeremiah Muvila was restored to the throne. Then the Poles crossed into Wallachia. Michael raced south too late. The Wallachian boyars betrayed him. They opened the gates of Bucharest and accepted a Polish-backed ruler. In 30 days, Michael lost everything: Transylvania, Moldavia, Wallachia, even his family. His wife and children were captured and imprisoned as hostages. By winter 1600, Michael the Brave was no longer a ruler. He was a fugitive. Most men would disappear. Michael rode west. To the one man who had allowed all of this to happen, the Holy Roman Emperor. In January 1601, Michael arrived in Prague, not as a conqueror, as a beggar. He lived in cheap inns, selling possessions to eat. He wrote letter after letter to Emperor Rudolf II, to the Pope, to Italian princes. He reminded them of the Danube, of the Ottomans he had destroyed, of the land he had saved. For months, the palace doors stayed closed. To the Habsburg court, Michael was finished. Until suddenly while Michael froze in Prague, Transylvania collapsed. Giorgio Basta proved to be a disaster. His mercenaries looted indiscriminately. Villages burned. Famine spread so badly that chroniclers recorded cannibalism. The Transylvanian nobles panicked. They rebelled and invited Sigismund Bathory back. Now Emperor Rudolf faced a crisis. Rebellion, Ottomans at the border, imperial authority disintegrating. He needed a man who knew the terrain. A man who inspired soldiers, a man reckless enough to fight a war already lost. So the emperor reopened the door. Rudolf's offer was cold: money, an army, help freeing Michael's family, but no crown. Michael would return as an imperial general, and worse, he would serve alongside Giorgio Basta, the man who had destroyed him. Michael accepted. He had no choice. In August 1601, the combined forces met Sigismund Bathory at the Battle of Gürislau. This time Michael fought like a man with nothing left to lose. He saw a weakness in the enemy formation and attacked immediately, smashing the line before it could stabilize. Basta followed, reluctantly. The hammer and anvil closed. By nightfall, the rebellion was crushed. Transylvania was secured. The soldiers cheered Michael. They did not cheer Basta, and that sealed Michael's fate. Basta understood something simple. Two swords cannot share one scabbard. Michael was too admired, too alive, too dangerous. Within days, Basta issued a secret order to mercenary captains: arrest him. If he resists, kill him. On August 9, 1601, before dawn, soldiers entered Michael's tent. He was unarmored, unprepared. When told he was under arrest, Michael reached for his sword. He never finished the motion. A halberd struck him from behind. A pistol fired at point-blank range. Michael the Brave fell to the ground, bleeding, dying. The man who had defied 3 empires was murdered by his own allies. To make sure the legend died with him, the mercenaries cut off his head with his own sword. His body was stripped and left in the dirt. For days it was mocked, but legends do not die easily. A handful of loyal soldiers recovered his remains in secret. His head was carried across the mountains and buried at Dilu Monastery. The inscription reads, "Here lies the head of Michael, the great voivode, slain by envy, not war, not hate." Envy. Michael the Brave failed in life. His union collapsed, his state vanished, his enemies survived. But history played the long game. The empires he fought are gone. The Ottoman Empire, the Habsburg Empire, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, all vanished, but the idea Michael proved possible endured. In 1918, when Romania achieved its great union, it was Michael's map they followed. The axe never fell on him in Bucharest, and in a way, it never truly did. History likes clean endings, victories, defeats, dates carved into stone, but real history doesn't end cleanly. Michael the Brave was cut down in a tent by men who called themselves allies. His union collapsed, his enemies survived him, and for a time it looked like the accountants had won the empires, the ledgers, the systems that grind ambitious men into dust. Yet look at the world now. The Ottoman Empire is gone. The Habsburg Empire is gone. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth is gone. But the idea Michael proved possible endured. For one brief moment, he showed that a people long treated as currency could redraw their own borders. He didn't build a lasting state, he built a precedent. And precedents are dangerous things. They wait, they sleep. Then generations later, they wake up. When Romania finally emerged united in 1918, it wasn't inventing something new. It was finishing something unfinished. That is the quiet power of history, not who wins in the moment, but whose ideas outlive their killers. If you've made it this far, thank you, truly. It means you care about the kind of history that doesn't fit neatly into textbooks. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe. It's the best way to support deep, long-form history like this and make sure these forgotten stories keep getting told. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Different countries, different languages, same curiosity. I read every single one, and tell me honestly, how did you like the video? Was Michael a visionary who saw a future no one else dared imagine, or a reckless gambler who burned too bright in a world that punishes ambition? Your perspective is part of the story now, and if you want to keep going, there's another forgotten leader waiting on your screen. I'll see you there.